Trial attorney and legal analyst Misty Marris joins me now. Misty, always a pleasure to have you. Let me get to the fundamentals of the case in just a second, but first, just your reaction to that circus-like entrance he had, in New York yesterday. Have you ever seen anything like that for somebody who's accused of such a heinous crime?
No, this was quite a spectacle. And in general, in the federal sphere, they don't do the perp walk. We've heard of that. That happens sometimes in state court. But this was, this is a federal complaint. And that's what he came to New York. And he went directly to the federal courthouse. And so the fact that you had so many people, you had the anti-terror unit, you had Eric Adams, you had this whole entourage around him. It was striking on a couple of fronts. One front is generally something like this level of security relates to protecting the individual because that somebody might attack them. In this case, he had a lot of fans and they were trying to keep those individuals away, which is really outrageous.
Yeah.
Right. And then Eric Adams, really making a point because of that to say this is not going to be tolerated in New York and almost creating this visual in order to deter anyone who may have a proclivity to do a similar act. So this was really, really something yesterday.
Yeah, it seems so rare. This seems like something that you'd see for the president, right?
Right.
Not somebody like Mangione. So now he's waking up behind bars in New York this morning. Now that he's back in New York and also just considering how much public interest is surrounding this case, how quickly do things move from here and what's next?
So he's going to have the right to a speedy trial in both the New York case and the federal case, but they're both procedurally in a different spot. We know there's a grand jury indictment that's already happened in the New York state level case. That's the case where he's charged with first-degree murder in furtherance of terrorism and other charges that are lesser included to that. So that case, the conference that we expected to go forward in state court yesterday didn't happen. That's adjourned to a date in the future. We don't know when. After that, there'll be 6 months under the speedy trial constitutional doctrine for that. And we know, Marky, these cases tend to go longer than that, but that's a general timeline. In federal court, this is just a federal court complaint. The next step is an indictment, which means a grand jury could convene, or there could be the preliminary hearing that's scheduled for later in January. And at that point, there would be an indictment on that front. On the federal case, federal cases move a bit faster. But if I had to guess, I don't think Alvin Bragg, District Attorney of New York, is going to give this one up to the feds too easy.
Yeah,
I think he's going to fight for the New York case to go first.
What do you think the likelihood is that he could face the death penalty, Misty, if he's convicted?
Well, we are at a really interesting moment for this because in the federal statute, the death penalty, the charge of murder with a firearm is death penalty eligible. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the Department of Justice will actually seek the death penalty. There's a process internally. It's reviewed. A recommendation is made. And guess who makes the final decision? The Attorney General themselves. So we're in an interesting moment here. Right. The Attorney General, the DOJ is about to change dramatically. January 20th, there'll be a whole new regime there. Right. And so you're talking about Pam Bondi, if she's confirmed, how will that look? So the policies may be a bit different, considerations a bit different. So it's difficult to tell. But in some of these cases, leveraging that death penalty in a case where it's eligible can sometimes lead to a plea deal. Plead guilty to life without parole, take the death penalty off the table. So it's certainly something that's going to be considered given the nature and severity of this crime.
Yeah, thanks for pointing out that nugget. I didn't realize that. Yeah, and also what the defense's approach is going to be. They have, prosecutors have this mountain of evidence against him, the manifesto, a gun. It'll just get more interesting from here. Misty Marris, have a great weekend and Merry Christmas to you and yours.
Yes, you too. Thank you.
See you again soon.